I seriously can't believe this is a real story. Hello, you beautiful human being, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Raquel, and I'm a Canadian living out here in Mexico, in Playa del Carmen, with my cat. This is Pumpkin. So if you don't know, I have been living here in Mexico for over a year, almost a year and a half now. 1 year in Tulum, and for going on 5 months now in Playa del Carmen. So I have been through some experiences here, and one of them was a road trip. Being a Canadian citizen, and also if you are from the United States, you can come into Mexico and stay for up to 6 months. So when I originally came down with my friend and her daughter and 2 cats, we needed to leave the country because the 6-month time that we were here was coming up, and so we needed to go. We came in August 2022, and February 2023 is when we needed to get out. So my friend thought it would be a good idea to do like a Latin American road trip. So we planned out the whole thing. We looked at Airbnbs, we looked at car rentals, we looked at the route, how long it's going to take us to get to each destination. Like, we literally planned it out from A to Z, but things did not go as planned. And you're gonna wanna stick around for this story, because literally all of the things that I've learned the hard way, you do not have to learn this the hard way if you do plan on renting a car while you're in Mexico and going to other countries. So the plan was for us to rent the car and then drive to Belize, because Belize is connected to Mexico, and then go through Guatemala and then end up in Honduras, where we booked a ferry to go to Roatan in Honduras, which is this little island that's about like a 45-minute, hour-long ferry ride, I think it was, from the main part of Honduras. So that was the plan. Things were going pretty smoothly. Honestly, no. Things did not go smoothly at all from the jump. My friend who rented the car, she didn't get the insurance originally online, and honestly, I don't recommend that you do that. I used to work in a car rental company, and not here in Mexico, but in Canada, and there's been so many instances where something will happen to the car that they're driving, and then they'll come back and be like, oh, the insurance and da-da, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, is the insurance with us, or did you get it, you know, through the online third-party site that you booked through? And they're like, yeah, I got it through the site, like, but this isn't what you guys cover. And we're like, no. So yeah, whenever I rent a car, and this is just a general tip for everybody, I would highly recommend that you go with the insurance at the actual rental company that you buy from. But anyways, that's a whole side note. But that's exactly what I suggested my friend do. And when she found out the price of the car insurance, it was actually ridiculous. I think the cost of the whole rental we got it for a week. The plan was to, you know, spend a couple days in each of the countries, and then just spend one long road trip back instead of stopping in all of the countries. We'll just do a long haul, maybe stop at one place and then make it back to Tulum the next day. So the car rental cost wasn't anything crazy. It was like a couple $100 for the week, which was normal. But then the insurance was like $400, and that didn't even include the tires or the windshield, anything that's honestly really important on a road trip. So we basically just spent our money on nothing. But we're like, whatever, we need to get out of the country. We're excited for this road trip. I personally love a good road trip. So we start our journey, everything is good. It's, you know, a few hours drive to the border in Belize. We get to the border in Belize, and immediately they're like,
where are your papers?
And we're like, what do you mean? The papers are right here. Like, here's our rental agreement, and here's like the insurance, like everything that came with our rental. And they're like,
No, hold up. You need a whole separate approved document.
From the rental car company that we had to pay for that says we are authorized to go into Belize.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
So that just immediately messed with our whole entire vibe. And we were there at the border in Belize for like a good few hours just talking to the rental company, trying to get this piece of paper so we can cross the border into Belize with our car that we paid a ridiculous amount for. So the good news there was that we eventually got the approval for, the car to go through and pass the border so that we can drive it in Belize. But the bad news with that is that every single new country that we were visiting along our road trip required, a brand new document, a piece of paper saying that we're allowed to take this vehicle from Mexico into these countries. And when we asked, what is the process? How can we get these papers? They told us that it would be like an additional 2 to 3 days and we would have to pay, an extra couple $100 to get these papers so we can go to these countries, which obviously we didn't have, because before we even left for the trip, we booked tickets for the ferry from Honduras to Roatan, and these tickets were not cheap. They're like $100 a person. We literally planned all of these things so we can make it in time to catch this ferry that we paid, a ridiculous amount just to get to our final destination in Honduras. And because, we've already started this road trip, we are not going back to Mexico, so we had no choice but to continue on and go through with this road trip. But we couldn't bring our car through to Guatemala and Honduras, so we had to figure something out. But anyways, let me go back. Belize, yes, we got the papers finally from the rental company, and they emailed it to the people at the border, and they allowed us to drive through with the car. Now, driving through Belize. Belize is beautiful, by the way. Amazing people, very friendly people. Prices are great. There's a lot of real estate out there, but the road conditions are not friendly at all. Like, we just had a regular 4-door Chevy Malibu, or I don't remember the exact make of the car, but it was just like a regular car. And if you are going to rent a car and do a road trip through Latin America, please get an SUV or a truck, a Jeep, something that is going to handle potholes and speed bumps and just different crazy road conditions. Because when we were driving through Belize, we hit a pothole and got a flat tire. And if you recall, when I was talking about the insurance does not cover tires. So that is another expense that had to come out of our pockets when we eventually returned the car.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
So we got a flat tire, we pull over, and these two, beautiful, just kind men stop at the side of the road, which after when I told my mom, she freaked out. She was like, oh my God, what do you mean? They could have kidnapped you and all this stuff. But this is what I mean when I say the people in Belize are super, super nice. So they helped us change the tire. And then we had to find, this tire guy. And keep in mind, this is Latin America, okay? You're dealing with people from the Caribbean, Latin American, however you want to describe it. So, and in a lot of these places, there's no directions for anything. You can't Google local tire shop and an option's gonna come up for you. No, you can't do that. Literally everybody we asked for a tire place, just so we can patch the original tire that we had, because you cannot drive that long on a spare tire. If you have ever gotten a flat tire, you cannot drive for a crazy amount of time on a spare. And obviously that is not conducive to a road trip. So we had to find this tire guy and get our tire patched up so we can continue on with our journey, in safety as much as we can at this point. So we asked a few people, are like, oh yeah, this guy, I forget his name. It's like Jimmy or John, something with a J, I think. He has his tire shop down the road. I'm like, oh, do anybody have his phone number? What's the address? Nobody knows. They just know him and just know the general vicinity of where he is. So we're driving around trying to find this guy to patch our tire. And we eventually find him. We pull up. He's not at the front though. This is like later in the evening when the sun is starting to go down. Anyways, we're just chilling out in the front of his house, just hoping he comes out, because at this point, we didn't book an accommodation in Belize because our whole plan was to drive to Guatemala and stay in an Airbnb in Guatemala for that first night. But we're still in Belize and the sun is setting on our first day. So we had no choice but to wait for this guy to come out and hopefully give us a solution to fix our tire. And he had a guard dog in the front. So we definitely were not trying to pull up and, you know, cause any problems with the dog that he had in the front, because it looked like it was trained to kill, okay? If you stepped any, you know, a certain amount to the door, then the dog would attack you. So we had no choice but to chill in our car. And eventually he comes out. Thank you, Savior. He's like the best thing that I could look at right now in this moment. And then he has this whole like shop that he's set up at the front of his house. And he patched our tire for us and he gave us the tools to do it ourselves. And he showed us how to do it ourselves if this were to happen again, you know, on the rest of our road trip. If we pop a tire, then he showed us how we can repair the leak in the tire if that happened to us. So we're like, yes, thank you so much for fixing our tire. Like that literally saved the day for us. But at this point, by the time that we finished, you know, getting the tire repaired, it was way too late in the night and we were just tired and over it from all of the mess that's been going on and thinking about next steps and the next days. What are we gonna do? How are we going to get to this island, you know, off of Honduras, take this ferry that we paid so much for? So we were just like over it and exhausted at that point. So we just Googled places to stay and it was such a blessing in disguise because we found this amazing little resort. It's a 2,000-acre property, okay, with animals. She had the Belize River going through her resort, honey, okay, and it's woman-owned and built. She was so nice, and when we got there, it was later. The kitchen had closed for the night, but she still opened the kitchen for us and made us a meal. They had a really, really cute cat there that I wanted to steal and take home. But anyways, that was a saving grace. It's called Clarissa Falls. If you are ever in Belize, check it out. Stunning, 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 beautiful property. And I did leave a review for her on Google. And if you guys didn't know, I am a Google local guide here in Playa del Carmen. So if you want to see my reviews on the places that I go here in Playa del Carmen, so you know exactly, you know, what places are good, what places are not, then check that out. I'll leave the link in the description below. So that was all in well. We stayed there for the night and the next day we head out again. So this time we are driving to the Belize Guatemala border. The plan was, once we're in Guatemala, we needed to stop somewhere and find a place that did COVID testing, because at that time, I'm not too sure about right now, but at that time that we did this road trip, Honduras was still very, very, very strict with the COVID testing rules to enter the country. So you needed to have a negative COVID test to, you know, pass and enter into the country. So the plan was to do that in Guatemala, but we were like, you know what, it's a new day here in Belize. Maybe we can find a place to do it here. That way, you know, when we get through Guatemala and we're at Honduras, we can just show them the test and like go through and just make that process a lot faster. So we went to a few different clinics. They didn't do it, unfortunately. And then we ended up eventually going to a hospital. But on the way to the hospital, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. So on the way to the hospital, there was a police checkpoint. So, you know, we didn't think anything of it. We're like, cool, cool, cool. Yeah, we're just here at the police checkpoint. Like, they're just gonna let us through. So the police stop us, you know, they ask us for all the papers, we give them the papers, and then they're like,
Okay, but where's your insurance?
we're like, what are you talking about, insurance? Like, we got our rental car, we got insurance with it, we have the paper, you know, that like to get into Belize at the border, so like, what's the problem? And they were like, no, you need separate insurance here in Belize. Like, this is an arrestable offense. So we just started freaking the F out. We're like, oh my God, we're gonna end up in Belizean jail. Who knows what that's like? My mom's gonna kill me. And like, my friend's on the side outside having a whole like panic attack. And we're trying to tell them like, nobody told us this. Literally nobody told us we need separate insurance to drive our car through Belize. That was a nightmare for a good like 30 minutes of them being like, where's your insurance? This is an arrestable offense. Blah, blah, blah. Where's your insurance? This is arrestable offense. Like, they kept saying arrest. We're gonna have to arrest you. We're gonna have to arrest you. And we're like, we're sitting there innocent as fuck being like, dude, literally nobody advised us of this coming here. So that is my tip to you guys as well. If you are in Belize, if you are going through any of these countries in Latin America, make sure to ask the rental company about every single thing that you need when you go into these different countries, okay? Because you need papers, you need to pay stuff, you need to wait a few days to get the papers, you need separate insurance for all of the countries, which is like, it's just mind-blowing. And us coming from Canada, when we rent a car here, we can just go to the United States if we want to. Like, we don't need separate insurance, we don't need any of that. And honestly, that was ignorant on our part because we just thought it was the same. Like, we just get our rental car, and as long as we have the papers from the rental car, then we can just drive this car wherever we want. So, tip for you. So anyways, after like 30 minutes of just trying to scare us, they eventually let us go, but they said, listen, if I see you guys come back this way, I'm definitely going to arrest you. And we're like, no problem, officer, you will not be seeing us again. So we leave, we go into the hospital. They don't have COVID tests available, so we had to leave, and we realized the only way out is back through that same police check. And we're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Like, these guys are definitely gonna arrest us if we go back, like, but we literally don't have an option. And keep in mind, where we were at this point, we were a 15-minute drive to the border at Guatemala. So whatever, we had to go back. Like, we literally had no choice but to go down this road. And then, of course, they see us, they stop us, but we were playing, you know, innocent tourists. We're like, we don't know, like, this is the only road, like, this is the only way. Where's an insurance place? Like, I literally pulled up my phone and I was like, please put in here the address of the nearest place that we can get insurance so we can go and get insurance like you guys want us to. So this guy tried to tell me this place. I don't even know, like, he was trying to spell it out for me, and I was just, it was not computing. So I just put like some random stuff in my phone and I was like, look, I mapped it here, 3 minutes. It like showed the route. And by doing that, they let us through and they let us go. And me and my friend just look at each other and we're like, no, we're not stopping to get insurance. So we drive to the border, like literally 15 minutes away. We just take our chances and we drive to the border. So now we are at the border of Belize in Guatemala. And yeah, we can't take our car through. We already knew that. So we already knew we had to pay for parking to keep the rental car there in their parking lot until the day that we return. And it is in a secure area, it's in a gated area. So we were fine with that. But now the issue is, how were we getting through Guatemala and through Honduras to this ferry to make it there on the specific day at the specific time for this ferry? So anyways, we go through the border, like we just get all of our stuff and we walk through the border into Guatemala. And the only way that we saw it possible to make it through Guatemala and save us time and make it in time for this ferry was to take a taxi. So from the Belize border, the Belize-Guatemala border to the Guatemala-Honduras border, I think that was about like an 8-hour drive, 7 hours, 8 hours, something like that. And so we found this taxi guy to take us, and that ran us like $200. That ran us like 200 Canadian, US? I can't remember exactly, but it was expensive AF. And we were frustrated this whole time because we already paid for this rental car for the entire time. Meanwhile, we could only take it for 1 day of our trip. And we also pre-booked these Airbnbs that we were gonna stay along the way. But at this point, our timing is already messed up because we missed, you know, the first day with getting that flat tire and staying in Belize when we were already supposed to be in Guatemala at that point. So the trip through Guatemala was actually pretty smooth. We found a guy to take us to St. Helena, I believe it was, because we still needed to get these COVID tests because we couldn't find any in Belize. So the guy takes us to St. Helena. That was my bad. So this first taxi driver that we came across, he wasn't the one taking us all the way to the border. He was just taking us to the middle central point in Guatemala, St. Helena, which is like a bigger city there. So we had more of a likelihood to find and get COVID tests there. So that is where he dropped us off in Guatemala. And we looked around, we went to a few clinics, and luckily we found one that did COVID tests, and that ran us like over $100 a piece. So that was more expense that we had to pay for. Like at this point, our pockets are just hurting. Like everything, like the money is just coming out of our ears at this point, like trying to fund this trip and to get to this frickin' ferry. So we get the COVID tests. Now the mission is to get to the Honduras border. So we think that we're gonna take the bus because we're like, okay, it's a cheaper option. You know, taxis are going to cost us a fortune again if we take one. But when I get to the bus station and I ask them, when is the next bus to the Honduras border? This guy said something like 10 p.m. at night, and then it was like a 9-hour bus ride to get to the Honduras border. And we're like, okay, that's not gonna work because again, the ferry time is booked and we need to be there. So unfortunately, we can't do that. So we end up taking another taxi. And this guy was interesting. He was very different and he drove really crazy, but he got us there nonetheless. That was another couple $100 expense out of our pocket. So honestly, at the end of this whole trip, we were in the hole about like $2,000 each. So we get to the border at Honduras. It's 11:30 p.m. and we're like, thank God we're here. Like we finally made it to Honduras. Everything is gonna be okay. No, the borders close at Honduras.
Oh my God! Wow!
The borders close from 10 or 11 p.m. and they reopen at 6 in the morning. And we got there at 11:30. So what did we do? We had to wait at the border, like literally outside overnight with a few other people who were also waiting for the border to open. And we were just like hysterical at this point. We're like, how many more things can go wrong on this trip? Like we were just laughing at this point because like it was just ridiculous. So we end up, you know, staying the night there. We had like towels and stuff in our luggage. So we used that, you know, tried to get some sleep. I didn't really get any sleep. I stayed up with my friend's daughter and we were playing cards and stuff with the security guard there, which was like, the security guard was like 18 years old and he had just like a gun chilling in the waistband of his pocket and he was just like chilling and I think he liked me, so he was just like playing cards with us all night. It was a very interesting night. I've never, you know, slept on concrete blocks before, but that's what we had to do. And there were outlets there, there was a bathroom. So, I mean, terrible, but not the absolute worst situation that we could be in at that time, I guess. And 6 a.m. comes around, the borders open, we finally get through into Honduras. And now we're like, okay, we need to get from the Guatemala-Honduras border to the ferry that's going to Roatan. So what did we have to do? We had to hire another taxi to take us to the Roatan, ferry docking place where the ferry leaves. So we find a taxi driver, again, that runs us another couple $100. Find this guy, he takes us there. We're like, thank God, in the final stretch of our trip, like we're sitting in the waiting area outside where the ferry, you load yourself onto the ferry, you get onto the ferry. And the ferry was supposed to leave. We had booked our tickets at 4:30 in the afternoon. We got to the ferry place at like 12:30. So we're like, cool, we're early. We have a little bit of time. We got some food. We just talked, we hung out, waiting for this ferry. And then 4:30 comes around and one of the attendants at, this ferry boarding area comes out and he's like,
No ferry today, guys. Ferry's canceled.
we're like, are you freaking kidding me? The ferry is canceled? Like, what? But apparently the water was like really, really rough that day. They had a lot of seasick people that day. So they just decided to cancel the next ferry, which was our ferry. And we were pissed. We were so pissed. But throughout this whole time, we were thinking of the high moments. We're trying to stay positive. We have our life. We have the ability in that moment to pay for and do the things that we needed to do to get out of these situations. And it was such a blessing finding that place in Belize to stay. Like, they were such nice people. It was such a beautiful place. So we're trying to focus on the positive here. So he says ferry's canceled. At this point, I'm just ready to I'm furious, I'm fuming at this point. So, but again, trying to focus on the positive in this moment, in these moments that we've had so far. So we're like, okay, when is the next ferry? When can we take this ferry? And they're like, okay, the next ferry is tomorrow at it was at 9 a.m. or some time in the morning. And we're like, are you sure that this ferry is going to leave tomorrow at this time? This is 100% certain. Because at this point we have PTSD about this road trip and just things going wrong and people saying things or not saying things to us that we just need to make 100% sure at this point that this ferry is going to leave at this time tomorrow. So the people were like, yes, it's gonna leave, based on the weather conditions and all this stuff, the weather is gonna be good tomorrow. So we're like, perfect. But we eventually had to find a place to stay. So I Googled a hotel and thank God when we were waiting, we ran into some really nice people. We ran into this guy who was trying to go to, the same place that we were going to. And this woman who was there for a doctor's appointment and she had to get back to her family. I felt so bad for her. But she was such a sweet lady and such an amazing connection to, meet and just talk to. So that was another blessing. And we all ended up going to the same hotel and that hotel was very, very cute, very reasonably priced. So again, focusing on the blessings there. So we ended up just staying at that hotel and actually had a good time. Went to this restaurant that had a live band and just really, really good music. So we ate whatever, go back to the hotel, sleep, wake up for this ferry, and finally we get on the ferry to go to Roatan. Honestly, at the end of that ferry trip, I'm so thankful that they canceled the ferry the day before because I was feeling so seasick. I do get seasick motion sickness and I was just trying to hold it together as best as I could at the end of that ferry ride. But I was just grateful that we were able to get there in time. So we get to Roatan and now we're trying to find our hotel. It's this very, very cute bed and breakfast in Roatan. The lady was super sweet, but it was really, really hard to find. And the directions that she was giving us just weren't directioning. She was turn left at the tree and then right at this place. And then we were just, where is the Google Maps? Send us the location, leave it to the technology. But No. So we were walking around, we're dragging our luggages like up hills because we think it's like up a hill and, you know, around the corner, whatever, and the ground is not paved, it's like gravelly. So we're dragging these like 40-pound suitcases with us. It was just an interesting time. But anyways, we get eventually to the hotel, and that hotel stay was very nice. We got to see Roatan, and it was such a beautiful place to be, like with the water, and the nightlife is good too. So that was a good time. We stayed for 2 days, and on our last days, we were thinking about the way back because we haven't thought that far ahead because, again, we thought we would have the car at this point. And we were just trying to survive all of these, you know, obstacles that were in our way up until this point. So we weren't even thinking about the way back, but we 100% for sure said we are taking a plane back to the Belizean border where our car is and then driving back. Like, we are not taking taxis all the way back to where our car is, like, and spending another like grand on taxis when we can pay, like, I think the plane was like $100 or something like that each person to get back. So we're like, hell yeah, let's do that. It's only like an hour plane ride. And we ended up in this little plane going back to Belize. But on the last night in Roatan, why did a girl get held at knife point? We're chilling in our room. We're, you know, winding down. It's late at night. It's like 11, 12 p.m. at this point. You know, we're chilling. And then we just hear terrified screaming from the window. And at first we're like, okay, maybe it's like, you know, she's with somebody and they're like just playing or whatever. And she's like screaming and whatever. We didn't think anything of it. Or maybe there's a dog, you know, and she's afraid of dog. Like, we were just like thinking of any situation other than what actually happened. So she kept screaming, and then yeah, the screams were pretty terrifying. So my friend goes and looks out the window and she's like, there's a guy with a mask on outside, like, and I honestly at this point I was just like frozen with fear. I was just like shook. My heart was racing so fast and I just like couldn't move. I was just like frozen in my bed. I was like, hell no. This is how people die in horror movies. I ain't going down there. But my friend and her daughter, they run outside and I look like a punk ass bitch, but they run outside and like her screams were so loud that thankfully that woke up a lot of people in the hotels that were around us. And you know, they were ready. Like one guy came with his dog and his rifle, another guy came with another gun, and like these were big dudes, so they scared him away, thankfully. And I felt so bad for the girl. Like, that's terrifying. When I heard the story after, she was coming back to her hotel room just after being out, and then she saw that the door was open a bit and the lights were on, and she's like, what the heck? So she goes in there and then she sees, you know, this masked guy trying to like steal her shit. So she freaks out and she starts like retaliating and fighting the guy back, and then eventually, you know, he pulls out a knife, like cuts her a little bit, and like just nothing serious. He didn't like fully stab her, you know, anything fatal. It was just like kind of like a scared, you know, cut situation, and pushed her down and ran off with her work phone. And that's the only thing that he stole. And I feel so bad for her. And that was such a terrifying situation. I was like, no, thank God that we're leaving tomorrow. Like, get me out of this place. Get me out of this place. But we were empathizing as well with the person who did it, because we're like, listen, these governments and like the conditions that we live in, a lot of people, you know, it's not their fault that they're in these conditions, and then they feel within themselves that they have to take that step and rob somebody else to survive and get by in life, which is just sad and unfortunate. But yeah, terrifying situation. Didn't want to be in there again. So I was so happy to leave the next day. We finally fly back to the Belizean Guatemala border. We get our car. We get insurance in Belize this time on the way back, because like we're like, there's no way in hell that we're going through, you know, the whole insurance debacle again in Belize. So we stopped somewhere, we got insurance for the day, which was like $10. and we drive all the way back home and we return home. Thank God, thank the Lord. We return home safe and sound. But yeah, that was my Latin American road trip from hell. So please take all of the lessons that you can from this video and ask all of the questions. Let these car rental companies know exactly where you're going, what exactly is needed by you to, get to all of these other places in Latin America before you embark on a road trip. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this story. Like, I still cannot believe it's real. Like, we could actually make a movie out of it. And to this day, I have not done another road trip in Latin America, and I don't think I will for a very, very long time. I'm scarred from that experience, but at least if I do choose and go on another road trip in Latin America, I know exactly what to do, and now you know what to do as well. So that is my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you like, this little story time video style. I would love to give you guys some more story times of my adventures here in Mexico or in my life in general, whatever you want to know. So if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and scroll down to the description below. I have some of my videos linked, just vlogging my life here in Mexico and my experiences, and giving you guys a lot more tips and tricks and places to go, things to know for your stay, your time here in Mexico, however long that is. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.